Chapter 1, Rose. June, the cicadas buzzing in the height of summer. Hadrian Courtenay and Rose Chandler had been in a cold war for 2 weeks, ever since Rose had said, "Let's get married." Marriage was Hadrian's minefield. He was happy to play with her, but he had no intention of marrying her. A rose was just a rose, how could it compare to a gardenia? Nightshade, the largest and most extravagant pleasure palace in Brightmoor City. Stepping into the lobby, the dazzling lights and the sense of decadent oblivion immediately washed over her. Well, look who it is. It's the second young master's friend. What friend? He's already finished with her. Rose was blocked by a group of Nightshade's hostesses, who pawed at her. Rose said angrily, "Good dogs, don't block the way." "Who the hell are you calling a dog?" Just as the argument threatened to erupt, a floor manager shouted at the women, "Get your asses to box 702 and pour some drinks." The women glared at Rose, spat, and then left in a flurry. Rose's expression darkened, her mood sour. Her dress and hair were disheveled, and she reluctantly went to the restroom to tidy herself up. The brightly lit mirror reflected the woman's beautiful face, a face blessed by the gods. Rose had an innocent seductive look, elegant and refined, with a hint of allure amidst the purity. Her skin was fair, her lips a vivid red, and she resembled a fawn in the forest, her crescent-shaped eyes sparkling wetly with a natural innocence, a beauty untainted by the world. Everyone said she looked 5 parts like Miss Sheridan, especially around the eyes. Rose had barely reached the entrance of the VIP box when she heard the others mocking and laughing at her. Rose has fallen out of favor, hasn't she? Haven't seen the second young master bring her here lately. It just goes to show, what's the point of looking similar? A substitute is just a substitute. When Miss Sheridan comes back, what chance does Rose have? Everyone said she was a substitute for the moonlight, Hadrian would never truly love her, but it didn't matter. She didn't care. When the others saw Rose's sudden appearance, they hushed and fell silent. In the crowd, Rose immediately spotted Hadrian Courtenay sitting on a single sofa. He was dressed in a black suit, exuding a noble air, legs crossed, a cigarette held between his long, slender fingers. The man was handsome, with aggressively attractive features. His mesmerizing phoenix eyes curved upwards at the corners, displaying an arrogant, nonchalant air, as if the whole world was nothing to him. He wore gold-rimmed glasses, appearing refined and gentlemanly, but was, in reality, the epitome of a cultured degenerate. That cold, defiant profile was so much like someone else. The atmosphere instantly froze, heavy with awkwardness. "Hadrian," Rose called softly. Hadrian glanced indifferently at the woman. He saw she was wearing a white, off-the-shoulder, high-waisted dress with a delicate belt design. Very chic and refreshing. Instantly, his eyes turned dark, cold as ice, and his voice dripped with displeasure. "Who told you to wear white?" He hated it when Rose imitated Sheridan. She couldn't touch anything Sheridan liked. No matter how much she resembled her, she could never be the flamboyant, radiant, and proud Sheridan. "Take it off." Rose could hear the suppressed anger in the man's voice. She looked alarmed, not knowing what she had done wrong. "I said, take it off." Hadrian repeated, his voice cold and with undeniable harshness. Rose lowered her eyes, her thick lashes fluttering like butterfly wings. Finally, submitting to Hadrian's authority, she raised her fair, slender hand and found the zipper on her back. She was only wearing a slip underneath. If the dress were taken off, who knew what would happen? Chapter 2, Kiss. In the nick of time, someone grabbed Rose's hand, stopping her from taking off her clothes in public. Rose looked up in surprise. The man in the dim light was strikingly handsome, handsome in a different way than Hadrian. He was beautiful in an almost demonic way, with eyes like peach blossoms, deep and clear, seeming to hold affection for everyone he looked at. It was Xander Westland, a top A-list celebrity with millions of fans. Because they had attended the same university, Rose was quite familiar with him. She must have been too nervous earlier, because she hadn't noticed Xander entering from outside. Xander was dressed in light-colored casual clothes, smiling to liven up the atmosphere. Taking off clothes? We're all friends here. It's not like we're hostesses. Rosie, sit down, this is my party tonight. Let's have some fun together. The gathering tonight was primarily to celebrate Xander's return to Brightmoor City after finishing filming a movie out of town. So, when Xander spoke, the others couldn't say anything. The back of Hadrian's hand, as he held the cigarette, showed a network of alarming veins. Almost imperceptible in the low light, his eyes glowed with frigid malice. He suddenly got up, those long legs straightening out the creases of his tailored trousers. Xander looked over and asked, "Going already, Hadrian?" Hadrian's voice was indifferent. "Just going out for some air." That's what he said, but everyone knew that the second young master didn't want to see Rose. Especially Rose in that eye-catching white dress. Next to them, someone suggested, "Since Xander's here, why don't we play a game?" "What should we play?" "Truth or dare?" No sooner said than done. These wealthy young men and women, familiar with the game of seduction, quickly got things ready. Rose wanted to leave since Hadrian had left. But Xander grabbed her arm and whispered, "Do you think Hadrian wants to see you in this state right now?" Xander's words made sense, but Rose didn't want to waste her time here either. She had only come to Nightshade to make peace. At this moment, the wealthy young men and women called out in the midst of their revelry, "Xander, it's your turn. What do you choose? Dare or truth?" Someone interjected, "Dare, definitely dare." Xander laughed unrestrainedly, looking every bit the carefree playboy. "Dare." Xander then drew a card. "Give a 1-minute French kiss to any woman present." Everyone gasped when they saw the content of the card. Ew. There were plenty of women present, most of whom had a man by their side, but they all craned their necks, eager to share this intimate moment with the movie star. "Pick me, Xander, pick me. Don't even try to compete with me. Xander is mine." "Rubbish. Xander will definitely pick me. I'm prettier than you." Xander lowered his lashes, making his peach blossom eyes look even more intense, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He then looked at the woman next to him, his eyes hinting at a plea for help. Rose sensed the difference in Xander's expression and felt a sense of foreboding. She stood up, her voice a little anxious, "I'm not feeling well. I'm leaving." Just as Rose was about to leave, Xander grabbed her wrist and, without a word, pulled her down onto a nearby sofa. The breath of an adult man grazed her ear, unfamiliar and causing her earlobes to flush red. Rose panicked and quickly said to Xander, "Xander, I'm Hadrian Courtenay's woman." Xander chuckled softly in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "We should keep our promises when we're out having fun. Help me out, will you?" Rose struggled for a moment, but Xander held her firmly in his arms. Her 5'4" frame was truly petite and pitiful in front of the 6'1" man. The man's voice was magnetic, "I just helped you out. Isn't this kiss a fair return gift?" Chapter 3, over. Rose cried out in alarm, "Xander Westland." As soon as she finished speaking, the man's pale lips came down. But Xander turned his head slightly, only landing on the corner of her lips. It was a perfect fake kiss that could be mistaken for the real thing. It seemed he really just wanted her to help him escape this game. Seeing this, the crowd cheered louder and louder, and some even took out their phones to record. Ooh. Ooh. The crowd thought this scene was so exciting. So cool. Why would Xander choose Rose? What's so good about her? I see now. It's not about the kiss at all. She knows she can't win back Hadrian, so she's trying to seduce Xander. She wins either way. Look at how much she's enjoying it. She really doesn't discriminate. The women present made unhappy noises one after another. Hadrian Courtenay came back from outside and saw the scene that set his blood boiling. Rose was kissing Xander. His dark eyes were as black as ink, his jaw tight, and his thin lips pressed into a firm line. It turned out that 1 minute could be so long. As soon as Rose got up, she met Hadrian's eyes as deep as an abyss, threatening to swallow her whole. She instantly understood one thing. Hadrian was angry. And very angry. So, before she could say anything, Hadrian forcibly dragged her away in front of everyone. Seeing this, Xander's eyes were deep, and his slender fingers gently brushed over his lips, the corners of his mouth subtly lifting with a hint of joy. Outside the box, Hadrian slammed Rose against the wall, and a sharp pain shot through her back. Then, Hadrian raised his hand, turned Rose's chin up, and dark eyes radiated frost that was almost impossible to meet. "How did you manage to seduce Xander Westland?" Rose furrowed her brows slightly, explaining, "It was just faking it." "Faking it?" Hadrian looked Rose up and down with suspicion, knowing her tricks when it came to seducing men. That was how she had seduced him in the first place, with that pure, innocent act. Hadrian's eyes darkened, as if recalling something, and he said in a sharp tone, "I remember you weren't a virgin. Did you give it to Xander?" Given how intimate they had looked, it was very likely. Besides, Xander had known Rose longer than him. They were classmates in college. When the matter of her first time was brought up, Rose, of course, couldn't forget who she'd given it to. She didn't want to argue with him anymore, and she wasn't in the mood to make peace. "Let go of me. I want to go home." Hearing this, Hadrian was even more displeased. She came when she wanted, left when she wanted? He tightened his grip, squeezing her slender chin even harder, making her frown in pain. "You want to seduce another wild man?" His grip was painful, she said, a little forcefully. "Aren't we over?" Hadrian's eyes narrowed. Even the gold-rimmed glasses couldn't hide the cold, sharp light in his eyes. "Who said that? It's been half a month since you even." Rose stopped talking. Hadrian laughed coldly, his voice laced with sarcasm. "So, you couldn't stand it after half a month of me not touching you? You were so eager to come out and seduce a man?" Rose's face flushed red with humiliation. "Hadrian, what nonsense are you talking about? I didn't." Suddenly, Hadrian grabbed her wrist and pulled her away. The man's authoritative voice brooked no denial. "You want a man, don't you? I'll satisfy you." She had offered herself up the first time they met, and now she was doing it again. At the end of the hallway, a girl who looked a lot like Sheridan was quietly watching the two figures walking away. She had followed Rose as soon as she entered Nightshade. The girl's eyes were complex, staring for a long time at the man at the very top of the hierarchy, Hadrian Courtenay, the second young master of the Courtenay family in Brightmoor City. Chapter 4, Enough. On the top floor of Nightshade, in the presidential suite reserved for top-tier VIPs. In the dimly lit room, cold moonlight streamed in. The lights were off. Hadrian took off his suit jacket in the moonlight, then casually rolled up the sleeves of his shirt. "Don't wear white dresses again." His voice was cold and sinister, full of anger. Then, Rose's white dress was ripped off. Hadrian dragged Rose into the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and forcefully washed Rose's lips, scrubbing them red. He found them dirty, since another man had kissed them. "Rose, we're not over." The sink was filled with water. Then, he held Rose's head down and plunged her into the water, humiliating her as much as possible. Rose desperately clutched his strong arm, struggling like a rabbit. The water slowly soaked her collar. She could barely breathe and snapped, "Hadrian, that's enough." Hadrian's eyes were dark and cold. After washing her a few more times, he was barely satisfied and took her out of the bathroom. In the bedroom, Rose was thrown onto the bed. The man followed closely, his hot breath brushing her ear, a storm brewing in his eyes. In the dim moonlight, Rose's brows were slightly furrowed, her eyes blurred, as if covered by a thin mist. Her wet, dark eyes reflected the man's face, a face so familiar that it brought tears to her eyes. She raised her hand and gently stroked his face. He was so much like Sheridan. Hadrian had a full 70% resemblance to her. How could she not like him? She couldn't bear to break up with him. Hadrian thought that the woman in his arms had a great figure, alluring and graceful. Underneath her delicate, radiant face were deep brown curls, like a delicate princess from a fairy tale, sweet and seductive. Lost in thought, he whispered, "Sheridan." The man's voice was soft, filled with endless affection. Hadrian looked down at the woman beneath him, feeling disappointed. She wasn't his Sheridan. He remembered when he first touched Rose, it felt bad, because someone had gotten there before him. The seemingly perfectly wrapped meat, when cut open, turned out to be rotten. It was frustrating. He was a bit of a neat freak. The next second, he remembered what he had just seen, Rose seducing Xander, the two of them kissing. The more Hadrian thought about it, the more restless he felt. He had only ignored her for half a month, and she couldn't help but come out and seduce a man? The force of his body gradually increased, determined to vent all the anger in his heart. An atmosphere of romance filled the quiet night. He could sleep with her, but he refused to kiss her. A long night. When Rose woke up again, she saw Hadrian sitting leisurely on the opposite sofa, coldly smoking a cigarette. His legs were crossed, his black shirt casually unbuttoned in the middle, and the sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, with bulging veins on his arms, full of mature male appeal. His delicate and seductive collarbones were exposed. Above that, a high, straight nose wore gold-rimmed glasses. The entire face was so handsome. Hadrian's phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, the cold, sharp light like invisible arrows, and his voice was fierce. "Take the pill." Rose obediently took the morning after pill from the bedside table and swallowed it in front of him. Under the covers, her fair hand rested on her stomach, feeling a little disappointed, secretly thinking, if I really had a child, would it look more like Hadrian? Would it be like him too? Chapter 5, Longing. Rose grabbed her clothes from the end of the bed. Fortunately, she could still wear them. After this night, maybe they were reconciled. After all, Hadrian had said, "We're not over." Hadrian just stared at her. He suddenly remembered their first meeting 3 months ago, at the party. He was surprised by her face. She was bold and brave and said she liked him. Telling him she liked him with a face similar to Sheridan? Feeling light and refreshed, Hadrian became more patient and said, "Rose, we agreed from the start, only to sleep together, no love. If you're going to be so insensitive, then get out." Rose lowered her eyes, looking a little disappointed. She knew she couldn't step on Hadrian's landmines again. Once was enough. He would never marry her. Hadrian's expression changed, the sharp lines of his jaw were very sharp, and the protruding Adam's apple slid slightly. Even the most casual movements were extremely attractive. "Don't come to Nightshade so often in the future." The extremely cold voice was laced with sarcasm, contempt, and sinister threats. "Don't even think about seducing Xander Westland. The Westland family wouldn't want you." The Westland family may not want her, but could the Courtenay family be interested in her? Besides, she didn't really want to seduce Xander Westland. "I understand," Rose said softly. Rose discovered her injuries when she went to the bathroom to clean up. After he bought the medicine, Hadrian treated her worse. He was determined to humiliate her with words, saying anything he could think of. A rose couldn't compare to a gardenia, but she was still a rose that someone had cherished in the palm of their hand. If that person hadn't been gone, how could she have been with him? In the end, Rose was harassed until the afternoon, before she finally left that bed. As she left Nightshade, she ran into Xander Westland. Her limping made things a little awkward. Everyone knew what she had been through. Xander touched his nose and chuckled. "Looks like last night was pretty intense." Did he not know why it was so intense? Looking at Rose's slightly puffed cheeks, he found her especially pleasing to the eye. His brown eyes reflected Rose's slender figure. Her waist was so thin that he could wrap his hand around it. Rose did look a bit like Sheridan, but she still had her own features. Like her sharp tooth and dimple. Rose didn't look like Sheridan when she smiled. Anyway, he thought Rose was prettier than Sheridan, like a cute kitten. Did you make up? Rose replied unhappily, what's it to you? Xander stepped closer to her until she had nowhere to retreat, her back pressed against the wall. Only then did the man finally speak, of course it's my business. He raised his eyebrows with a wanton look, if you and Hadrian didn't make up, I'd have a chance to step in. As for why he wasn't a newcomer who was taking over, Hadrian was still overseas, spending time with his white moonlight, Sheridan. He wouldn't have returned home unless she had dumped him. You're sick. Rose pushed him away with force and leaned against the wall to move forward with difficulty. Xander was full of smiles. Of course, he was sick with longing. Rose finally managed to get out of Nightshade and had just taken out her phone to call a cab home when the phone rang. 2 people, 3 words, the pain of longing, the bitter longing, twisting in the heart, hidden in the teeth. The contact name was Mr. Shaw. Seeing that it was an acquaintance, Rose quickly pressed the answer button. Chapter 6, Sheridan. Mr. Shaw, Rose called sweetly. The man she called Mr. Shaw was a photography guru, a 36-year-old man named Sean Shaw. He had come to Brightmoor University as a special guest to teach a few photography classes. Seeing that she was smart and eager to learn, he took her as his apprentice. Sean's voice was gentle. Rosie, the crew is starting filming at the end of the month. I'll pick you up that weekend, okay? The thing Sean was talking about had been discussed before. AS Plus costume drama, Eternal Longing, was about to start filming, and Sean was the head of the photography team, with great power in selecting photographers. Because Rose had stepped on Hadrian's landmine by wanting to get married, causing him displeasure, he had directly cost her a job that she was still turning in and had been blocking her in the photography circle. Sean had thought of their past friendship and had let her join the crew as his assistant. She tried to make peace with Hadrian, not only because she was attached to his face and couldn't bear to leave him, but also because she was afraid that he could make it impossible for her to survive in Brightmoor City. Rose knew that she couldn't afford to offend the powerful, but in the end, she still lost to Hadrian's face and couldn't refuse someone so similar to Sheridan. Okay. Since she had already agreed, she couldn't go back on her word. In the elevator. Seeing that Hadrian was like a moving iceberg, not paying attention to him, Xander joked with a smile, Hadrian, you care so much? Was he still hung up about last night's events? Xander thought to himself, it seemed that Hadrian was quite possessive of Rose. Hadrian looked cold and weary, remaining non-committal. When they reached the first floor, the two stepped out of the elevator and walked out of Nightshade. Suddenly, a woman was running towards them. She looked back as she ran, her face tense and flustered. Suddenly, she fell into Hadrian's arms. Xander, looking at the girl's familiar face, exclaimed, Sheridan? The girl looked a lot like Miss Sheridan. Hadrian helped the woman in his arms up. When he saw her appearance clearly, his joyful expression disappeared instantly, and his eyes dimmed. It wasn't Sheridan. Just a woman who looked 80% like Sheridan. Damn, you bitch, you dare to run? You dared to hurt young Master Trent? I gave you face, but you didn't want it. Bah, you're selling yourself, but want to act high and mighty? The men chasing her came over, cursing. The girl immediately hid behind Hadrian, seeking shelter. These men were used to being arrogant and domineering. They didn't restrain themselves when they saw Hadrian and Xander. They were still. Shameless, staring fiercely at Hadrian. Who are you? Young Master Trent has his eyes on this chick. I advise you to be sensible. If you want to be a hero, you have to know your own weight. Hadrian snorted disdainfully, his eyes full of cold malice. Young Master Trent? That's right, Trent Su, the young master of the Trent family in Jiangdong. The man proudly stated his name, trying to intimidate them. Now that you know young Master Trent's name, you're afraid, aren't you? Xander laughed contemptuously, as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. So it's that little grandson. Last time I boxed with him, he couldn't even take 2 punches and pissed himself. At this time, Trent Sue, wearing a floral shirt and with a bleeding head, came out of the box, wanting to go to the hospital. Damn it, haven't you caught that woman yet? Trent Sue cursed, what are you guys doing? Young Master Trent, she's over there. Trent Sue looked in the direction his subordinates were pointing and cursed under his breath, damn it. Seeing the acquaintances he couldn't afford to offend, Trent Sue had no choice but to immediately step forward, nod and bow, and exchange greetings. Mr. Westland, Mr. Courtenay, what are you two doing here? Hadrian looked down at him condescendingly, his phoenix eyes radiating cold light, making him difficult to approach. Xander patted Trent Sue on the shoulder, joking, oh, so badly injured? Beaten up by a woman? Chapter 7, Treatment. That last sentence really made Trent Sue lose some face. He glared fiercely at the woman hiding behind Hadrian, feeling frustrated. Trent Sue looked embarrassed, cautiously probing, Mr. Courtenay, this woman. Hadrian was nonchalant, his tone cold. With just that one word, Trent Sue had no choice but to admit defeat, lowering his head and denying, I don't know her. I don't know her. The girl looked at Trent Sue, a hint of mockery in her eyes. Before leaving, Xander Westland passed Trent Sue, saying expressionlessly and fiercely, keep your people in check in the future. If they can't speak properly, sew their mouths shut. Young Master Trent, who are those two? Damn, what can your dog eyes see? You don't even recognize Hadrian and the young master of the Westland family? Trent Sue had been embarrassed and was in a foul mood, his tone angry. The Courtenay and Westland families were 2 of the 5 major families in Brightmoor City. Who would dare offend them? In front of true power players who could move heaven and earth with one hand, the Trent family was just a small fry, only fit to be crushed and trampled. Trent Sue stared deeply at the figures leaving, gritting his back teeth and saying fiercely, damn it, how did that little bitch seduce Mr. Courtenay? Damn it. The duck at his mouth had flown away just like that. He hadn't even gotten a bite of meat. Facing Hadrian's rescue, Eve Wainwright was thrilled. She suppressed her excitement, showing innocent weakness, and said shyly, thank you. Even her voice sounded 6 or 7 parts like Sheridan. What's your name? Eve Wainwright. Having accidentally met such a woman who resembled Sheridan so much, Hadrian was treating her very well. As a substitute, Rose's treatment was much worse. Headquarters of Hawaii Film and Television, the largest capital company in the entertainment industry, in the president's office. Xander Westland looked at the man signing documents across from him. Hadrian's handwriting was like his personality, vigorous and forceful, with sharp edges. He seemed gentlemanly and reserved on the outside, but in reality, he was a bloodthirsty demon, very cold-blooded. Hadrian, if you've taken a fancy to that Eve Wainwright, then what about Rose? Eve Wainwright was originally an obscure 18th-tier star who had tried to hook up with Trent Sue in order to move up. But now Hadrian had not only made her an artist under Hawaii, but also had the golden agent Yero Seong personally manage her, and had even temporarily replaced the leading actress in the soon-to-be filmed S+ costume drama Eternal Longing with Eve Wainwright. With this kind of money-driven support, she would definitely become a first-tier star in less than 3 months. Hadrian capped the pen in his hand, lifted his eyelids, and looked at Xander. His lips curved slightly, with absolute confidence. Rose loves me. She won't leave me. What Xander heard was, even if I have many lovers, Rose can only choose to accept it because she can't bear to leave me. Xander was unhappy. Just as he was about to say something, there was a knock on the door. Enter, Hadrian said coldly. The person who came in was Hadrian's assistant and secretary, Ferris Fong. Mr. Courtenay, the opening ceremony is ready. Hawaii had invested billions in Eternal Longing. The first filming location was set at the famous outdoor location base, Azure Peak Mountain. Hadrian seemed to remember something and continued to instruct, when Cyril Shaw arrives in Brightmoor City in a few days, you and the director will personally greet him. Cyril Shaw, the original author of Eternal Longing, was 27 years old, had a doctorate in literature from a foreign university, was fluent in 12 languages, was a well-known best-selling author, and was ranked first on the original Heavenly King chart. Yes, Ferris Fong accepted the order. The reason Hadrian was so respectful to screenwriter Cyril Shaw was ultimately because of his noble identity, a member of the Shaw family in Imperial City. Perhaps he could be linked to a chain of benefits in the future. The Shaw family also took the path of commerce, which was a good fit with the Courtenay family. Businessmen were all about benefits. Chapter 8, Visit. Although their relationship had eased in recent days, Rose hadn't seen much of Hadrian. But that was to be expected. Hadrian had important matters to attend to. There was 1 week left before the crew started filming at the end of the month. She would be very busy when she joined the crew with Sean Shaw. She was afraid that Hadrian would forget her after a long time. Rose heard the doorbell ring. She thought Hadrian had arrived and went to open the door. No one was there. Only a bouquet of roses, seemingly saying, "The counterfeit is good." Rose reluctantly took the flowers home. She didn't even need to guess. It was another one of Hadrian's cruel jokes. He liked to send her roses. Since being kept in this luxury apartment by Hadrian, someone would automatically come up and send flowers every 3 days. The vases in the house were always filled with roses. Rose had just sat down when the doorbell rang again. She went to open the door in confusion. It was an adult man. The man was tall, wearing a baseball cap and a mask. Although his clothes were ordinary, he had a great physique. He looked good in anything. His eyes were deep, and his light brown pupils were unique. Rose felt that the man's delicate upper half of his face was a little familiar. Without hesitation, she quickly pulled off the man's mask. His true face was revealed instantly. "Xander Westland?" Rose asked in surprise. What was a big star like him doing at her house? "What are you doing at my house?" Xander touched his nose sheepishly, avoiding her gaze. He coughed lightly. "Of course, I came to you for something." Rose asked in confusion, "Why couldn't you just call me?" Xander deliberately leaned closer to Rose. His eyes, which charmed thousands of girls, seemed to be looking at her with affection. His voice lowered, sounding very magnetic. "I have to tell you this in person." Rose pushed him away, her voice a little indifferent. "Say what you have to say." Xander raised his eyebrows and smiled. "I've come all this way. Aren't you going to invite me in to sit down?" Rose's hand had been gripping the doorknob, showing no intention of letting him in. It's not appropriate for a single man and a single woman to be alone. Xander's smile was deep and increasingly playful as he teased her. "We've already kissed. Are we going to be so formal?" As soon as this matter was brought up, Rose felt frustrated. She puffed up her cheeks and widened her crescent eyes in anger. In Xander's eyes, she was exceptionally cute, so he reached out and touched her head. Rose ruthlessly slapped his hand away, thinking that he must be bored and had come to tease her. She was about to close the door. Xander was quick-witted and stopped the door from closing. Rose was a little anxious. The two struggled, but obviously, Rose was no match for Xander. So, Xander used his excellent physique to finally squeeze in, but Rose tripped him. The next second, his entire body lunged towards Rose. Before Rose could react, she was knocked against the entryway cabinet by the man, feeling a little sore in the back. Rose pushed him a few times, but couldn't move him, so she stomped on his foot with force. Xander felt a slight pain, but still raised a smile. His pretty eyes were captivating, with just a casual smile. "So ruthless?" Then he sighed and lamented, "It's a waste of my good intentions. I was planning to come and give you a heads up. There's a temptress who's taking advantage of the situation recently." Rose wasn't annoyed by Xander, who was always playful and liked to tease her, because his eyes were a little like someone else's. Unfortunately, he only resembled him by a tiny bit, not as much as Hadrian. Rose looked up at him, frowning in confusion. What do you want to say? Chapter 9, Scandal. Xander stopped joking, straightened up, took out his phone, found Eve Wainwright's photo, and handed it to Rose. There was a hint of complaining in his words. Hadrian recently met a woman who looks even more like Sheridan than you do. He's been with her these past few days, all lovey-dovey. Rose stared blankly at the photo on the phone. No wonder she hadn't seen Hadrian. He had a new love. The woman in the photo really looked a lot like Sheridan, especially her profile, which was exactly the same. A substitute who looked even more like her. And Hadrian also signed this 18th-tier star to Hawaii. Recently, he gave her the leading role in the S+ costume drama Eternal Longing and spent a lot of money on marketing. She'll soon be a first-tier star, Xander's voice sounded again. Rose came back to her senses and took out her phone to call Hadrian's private number. It took several tries to get through. On the other end of the phone, the man's voice was a little cold. I'm working. Rose asked softly, why have you been so busy lately? I heard. Mr. Courtenay, have a strawberry, a delicate female voice suddenly sounded on the phone. Rose was a little shocked. Her mouth was faster than her brain as she boldly asked, Hadrian Courtenay, do you have a new love? On the side, Xander was leisurely strolling around, seemingly curious about the room. The aroma from the kitchen drew him in. Rose, you're not my wife. You're not qualified to check up on me. After the man said coldly, he hung up the phone. Rose stood there, feeling complicated, and suddenly felt a sense of powerlessness. Hadrian was arrogant, self-centered, and had none of that person's tenderness. Was she wrong to be with him? Xander was completely at ease, not acting like an outsider at all. He was holding a bowl of fish soup and drinking it in big gulps. Rosie, did you make this yourself? He smiled, his voice cheerful, and praised, it's really good. Rose was already in a bad mood. Seeing Xander being so shameless, she angrily picked up a pillow and threw it over. Shameless? For a moment, she didn't know who that word was aimed at. Xander crouched down to pick up the pillow. He had heard the entire conversation. There's no need to be so sad. Hadrian only loves Sheridan. As for that Eve Wainwright, he's just playing around. He'll definitely get bored in a few days. He seemed to be comforting her, but he was actually mocking Rose's poor taste in men. With Hadrian's feelings for Sheridan, as long as Eve Wainwright worked hard enough, she could completely surpass Rose. While the two were together, in the high-rise building across the street, a paparazzi had already taken pictures of everything in the house. With Xander's popularity in the industry, this news would definitely be a hot search as soon as it was released. #Film Emperor Xander secretly keeps a mistress, meets up on weekends, the two embrace affectionately and flirt with each other, their relationship is stable, #. As soon as this headline appeared, it immediately occupied all online resources, and the industry was boiling and crazy. Xander's assistant, Chester Chin, ran over to ask his prodigal boss after seeing this. Oh my God, little ancestor, where did you go the other day? Although Xander often went to pleasure palaces like Nightshade, Nightshade had strict rules and wouldn't leak information. Why does this woman look so much like? Because Xander and Rose didn't have a front-facing angle when they had close contact, most of the photos that were released were profiles. For a time, the entire internet was trying to find out who the woman in the photo was. At the same time, at Hawaii Film and Television, Xander and Hadrian were brothers since childhood. Their chain of interests was tightly bound together. As Hawaii's top star, Hadrian would know about anything that happened to Xander as soon as possible. President's Office. Assistant Ferris Fong came to report the matter. Hadrian didn't care much, his tone indifferent. Do I have to handle even this little thing? But when he glanced at the photos online, his pupils suddenly contracted. Chapter 10, The Crew. The scandal was quickly dealt with by Xander's side. Although he was a top film emperor, he was also a capitalist. All the photos taken by the paparazzi had been bought out by him at a high price. Otherwise, even more ruthless news would have been released online. He had been in the entertainment industry for a long time and knew the bad atmosphere in the industry. He would never let Rose bear the criticism that she shouldn't. Besides, there was nothing between them. They had never had that kind of relationship. They were innocent. Even if he wanted something, Rose wouldn't like him. The person she liked was Hadrian. Seahaven Villa. Hadrian was in bed with Eve Wainwright when Xander called. Eve Wainwright put her arms around Hadrian's neck, smiling sweetly. "Mr. Courtenay, your phone is ringing." Hadrian glanced sideways, not answering. He had slept with Rose for 3 months. He could recognize her in the scandal photos at a glance. Hadrian's voice was low and magnetic. "So distracted? It seems I'm not trying hard enough." Eve Wainwright snuggled into Hadrian's arms, acting shy, and her voice was seductive and bone-chilling. "Oh, Mr. Courtenay." In the dark, Hadrian's eyes were extremely dark, his handsome face cold, and his deep eyebrows made it impossible to see his emotions. Compared to cheap women like Rose, who liked to seduce men, he now preferred Eve Wainwright, who was understanding and moving. Although he was exercising, Hadrian couldn't help but imagine Xander and Rose's relationship. He felt depressed and extremely uncomfortable. Until the end of the month, Rose hadn't seen Hadrian again. She couldn't get through to his calls. Out with the old, in with the new. Before going to the cruise hotel, Rose chose to send Hadrian a message: "I'm going to work on the crew. I won't be able to be with you for the next few months." As for that be with, he would only let her sleep with him. As soon as the message was sent, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. Hadrian had probably forgotten about her long ago. The summer in late June was hot, and the air was filled with dry heat, making people feel upset. Under the hot sun, Sean Shaw was waiting outside the community. As an artist, Sean had long hair, tied into a braid at the back of his head. He also had a beard, which was very artistic. It highlighted his most attractive part, his eyes. With his height of 6 feet, he was considered an Uncle Heartthrob. Sean saw the petite woman in a light blue dress at a glance. Her pure and beautiful face seemed too immaculate to be tainted by the mundane world. Sean waved to her, his voice gentle. "Rosie." Hearing the familiar voice, Rose walked over quickly. She had sweet and intoxicating dimples when she smiled. Even her cute baby teeth would show. "Mr. Shaw," Rose called sweetly. On the car, Sean chatted with her casually, with a light smile. "The crew will be filming at Azure Peak Mountain Base for 2 months. There are many bugs in the mountains. Take care of your protection." Faced with concern from her mentor, Rose nodded with a chuckle. "Okay." Sean's eyes darkened. When they encountered a red light, he stopped the car and asked, "Why are you living in Emerald Garden?" Emerald Garden was the most famous wealthy area in Brightmoor City. A house cost tens of millions. It was definitely not something an orphan like her could afford. Rose didn't know how to answer. She couldn't directly say that she was being kept. Fortunately, after the red light passed, Sean didn't continue to ask. It was very quiet along the way. The hotel for the Eternal Longing crew was not far from Azure Peak Mountain Film and Television Base. It was a 5-star hotel, revealing luxury everywhere. There are few girls in the photography team. You'll be sharing a room with someone from the makeup team. She's about your age. You should get along. Sean thoughtfully helped Rose take her luggage from the car. Room number is 8014. I have something to do later, so I won't show you around. Rose waved goodbye to Sean. Goodbye, Mr. Shaw. Then, she dragged her suitcase into the hotel. The magnificent hall was full of people, probably the crew members. She heard that the Eternal Longing crew had booked the entire hotel. It was so rich that it was inhuman. Room 8014, Rose knocked on the door. Chapter 11, Female Fan. After a while, a girl with a high ponytail and fair features opened the door. "You are..." Yeroma looked Rose up and down, her eyes exploding with amazed light. Suddenly, she cheered happily. "Are you the fairy sister that team leader Shaw mentioned? He said you were very beautiful. I didn't believe it before, but I didn't expect it to be true." Yeroma was outgoing and very friendly. She extended her hand to Rose and said, "Hello, my name is Yeroma. Please take care of me." Rose smiled faintly and shook her hand. "Hello, Rose Chandler." "Come in quickly," Yeroma said cheerfully. The layout of the room was the hotel's standard double room with 2 beds on the left and right. Rose looked at the wall on the head of the bed on the right. There was a poster of Xander Westland on it, and there were also many of his fashion magazines on the bed. Yeroma briefly cleaned up the scattered magazines and cheered with excitement. "I'm a female fan of film Emperor Xander. Top male star Xander Westland. He's also the male lead in this drama." Rose could hear her excitement. She thought that Xander was quite popular with young girls. In the eyes of fans, their film Emperor Xander was an unattainable flower, a cold and handsome star. But in reality, he was a playful playboy and a rich heartless young master. "Hey, wait a minute." Yeroma changed the subject and suddenly looked at Rose's back carefully, even taking out her phone to compare. She frowned. "Do you know about the hot search a few days ago? The woman with film Emperor Xander, it feels a little like you." Rose knew about that scandal. It was all made up. She had known Xander for so long. Every time she came into contact with him, she would always be photographed, but Xander was conscientious and would take care of the paparazzi. Rose said in a gentle voice, "That wasn't me. How could I possibly know the famous film Emperor Xander?" Yeroma thought that made sense and nodded. "That's right. If you knew him, how could you just be a small photographer?" After a brief time together, Rose felt that Yeroma was pretty good, lively, and cheerful. Chapter 12, Gentlemen. In the evening, the two went out for dinner together. Azure Peak Mountain was close to the sea. There was a sea breeze, so it was cool and refreshing at night. On the way back to the hotel, a white cat kept following them. Rose loved small pets. She used to have a cat, but it was lost and she was sad for a long time. Rose squatted down and gently stroked it, saying, "This clean cat should have an owner. Could it be lost?" Yeroma also touched the cat's head and agreed, "Probably. I think it's a purebred cat. It's quite expensive." Rose held it in her arms, gently stroking its fur. "It's been following us all along. We can't really take it back, can we?" Yeroma suggested, "Why don't we put it at the hotel front desk? When its owner finds it, they will definitely ask the front desk." "Okay." So, the two hugged the cat and returned to the hotel. The gleaming lobby and the warm yellow light made the night exceptionally quiet. The cicadas singing in the summer were like limited music, permeating the world, agitating the heart, and all was quiet. Not far away, a man's gentle voice was low and angry. You could hear that he was trying to suppress his anger. "I asked you to watch over Snowball. How did you let it get lost? How can you not even watch a cat?" "Mr. Shaw, I only went to the bathroom. I really didn't expect that little guy's legs could run so fast." Faced with his master's scolding, Darren lowered his head to take the blame. "I've already sent someone to look for it. There will be news soon." "Oh." A sigh and a soft meow from below. Rose accidentally, the kitten jumped out of her arms and went straight to the man not far away. Meow meow meow. It meowed several times, ran all the way to the man's feet, and rubbed against him obediently. Cyril Shaw was happy to get his pet back. He squatted down and held it in his arms. His slender, fair palms could stroke it entirely. Rose and Yeroma ran over with the cat. They saw a tall man with a handsome appearance, gentle and refined. He had a quiet and introverted temperament. He was the very picture of a gentleman, even if it was only a description in a book. His black hair fell past his shoulders, and his bangs were casually scattered on his forehead. His features were exquisite, deep and three-dimensional. His blue-green eyes had a mixed-race feel. He looked gentle and kind overall, but the black round-framed glasses he wore on his nose were old-fashioned. His thin white long sleeves and khaki casual pants were a good match for his clean academic aura. Rose was a little dazed as she looked at the man. His temperament was so much like that person. Cyril Shaw smiled faintly and took the initiative to say, "Did you help me find my cat?" "Thank you." Rose shook her head, denying, "No, it followed us all the way back." Cyril Shaw's smile made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. The corners of his eyes curved downward, squinting into a narrow slit, showing sincerity. His voice was gentle, like an unhurried breeze, gently brushing against the heart. "In any case, I still want to thank you." On the side, Yarrow Ma tugged at Rose's sleeve, her eyes filled with infatuated light. She whispered in her ear, "Oh my God, it turns out this cat is Cyril Shaw's. He's really handsome. He has an academic aura." Rose frowned slightly, puzzled. "Mr. Shaw?" "He's the screenwriter and original author of this drama, Cyril Shaw, a super-famous doctor of literature and a best-selling author at home and abroad." Yarrow Ma excitedly told Rose about Cyril Shaw's glorious identity. Hearing this, Rose couldn't help but add a bit of admiration to her eyes. He took the cat's paw and greeted the two. "Snowball, say thank you to the sisters." Rose watched the white fluffy little ball, her voice gentle. "It's okay, it's normal for kittens to run around." Cyril Shaw still had a faint smile on his lips. Looking at Rose and Yarrow Ma, he said politely, "Sorry for the trouble." Faced with the thanks of a real big shot, Yarrow Ma quickly waved her hand. "No trouble, no trouble. Mr. Shaw, Director Yu wants you." Cyril Shaw's assistant, Darren Yu, reminded him from behind. Cyril Shaw pushed up his glasses, his eyes calm, and his lips curled up, his tone forever gentle. "Sorry, a little busy. I'll thank you properly next time." Just as Rose was about to say something polite, Cyril Shaw turned and left. Yarrow Ma watched the man's broad and gentle back gradually disappear and couldn't help but sigh. Mr. Shaw is really gentle. That kind of clean, retro, academic aura can only be found in Mr. Shaw. Softness with perseverance. This is my imagination of the perfect scholar. Don't you like Xander Westland? Are you already cheating? Rose teased her. Yarrow Ma intimately wrapped her arm around Rose's arm. The two walked towards the room. "Oh, I'm not cheating. Film Emperor Xander is my true love. It's just a pity that Film Emperor Xander is busy with fashion magazines these days. He doesn't have time to attend tomorrow night's opening banquet. That top star is really busy." "Rose, do you have a favorite celebrity?" A faint smile appeared on Rose's eyebrows. Past memories played slowly like old records, gentle and warm. "I like a female star. She's very beautiful." Chapter 13, Tenderness. The next night was the opening banquet. The crew booked the entire Royal Grand Hotel, which was the most upscale place in Brightmoor City. There were many media present, and there were photographic devices in all directions, flashing lights, and all kinds of brilliance. In the corner, Yarrow Ma's gossipy voice came to Rose's ears. "Hey, do you know TV Queen Yarrow Hayes? Let me tell you a big story. The original female lead for this show was supposed to be her, but then..." Yarrow Ma looked around, leaned over, and whispered in Rose's ear, "Later, she was replaced." "Why?" "Because Mr. Courtenay wanted to support his new lover. You know Hadrian Courtenay, right? The most famous capital magnate in the entertainment industry." Rose lowered her eyes, her hands that were fiddling with the camera paused, not replying. It was more than just knowing. They were practically extremely familiar. Rose didn't respond, but Yarrow Ma continued to talk to herself. The woman's gossip was endless. Rose had never heard of entertainment news before, but now she heard it all. "Welcome Miss Eve Wainwright," the female lead. As the director's voice fell, a delicate and charming woman appeared in the hall, in front of the cameras. Eve Wainwright showed some shyness. She was wearing a white gauze sequined fishtail dress, and her S-shaped curves were perfectly displayed. The 6'2" man beside her made her look exceptionally petite and charming. Hadrian Courtenay was wearing a dark blue striped suit, and he was still wearing gold-rimmed glasses on his straight nose. His extremely aggressive face was unforgettable because his phoenix eyes always contained indifference and coldness, looking down on the entire world. But tonight, his eyebrows and eyes carried a bit of rare pity and gentleness, and his mouth also had a faint smile. The man's well-jointed hand intimately held the woman's slender waist, a picture of handsome men and beautiful women, a visual feast. Rose's eyes were dim. She actually thought that Eve Wainwright was better looking in person than in the photo. Although Eve Wainwright also didn't have Sheridan's nobility and pride, she was already able to win over her with a 7 or 8-point resemblance in facial features. Hadrian really couldn't forget his white moonlight, and the woman he was looking for would always have Sheridan's appearance. Now, everyone in the industry knew that Mr. Courtenay treated his new love as a treasure, and loved her as much as possible. Wow, Mr. Courtenay is really handsome. No wonder he's a well-known sugar daddy in the industry. Female artists all want to be kept by him. Yarrow Ma's voice carried some envy. However, I still prefer someone like Film Emperor Xander with a youthful air, but it seems like Mr. Courtenay's domineering style is also okay. Men who are almost 30 have a unique mature charm that makes people fall deeply in love. She was a female fan of Film Emperor Xander, and also a face lover. Yarrow Ma fell into a fantasy and also poked Rose, who was beside her. "Rose, which one do you like? Film Emperor Xander or Mr. Courtenay?" Rose looked at Hadrian. Under the flashing lights, the man was so noble that it was unbelievable. It seemed that no one could match him. She lightly pulled the corners of her mouth, her eyes flickering. "I like tenderness. After all, in the world of love, tenderness is the ultimate weapon." Yarrow Ma didn't hear, and couldn't hear, Rose's hidden meaning. She nodded in agreement. "I also like gentle men. It's best if they are cold to others, and especially fond of me." "Do you think Film Emperor Xander is that kind of person?" At this time at another part of the banquet. Yarrow Hayes looked at Eve Wainwright's triumphant appearance, surrounded by everyone, and wished she could swallow her alive. She had been trying to seduce Hadrian so many times without success. Why was it that an 18th-tier star like Eve Wainwright could be liked? Yarrow Hayes' assistant comforted her. "Hayes, don't be angry. Getting angry will cause wrinkles. Or, let Chairman Quint." Yarrow Hayes was so angry that she gnashed her teeth, her tone angry. How can Quint Depp compare to Hadrian Courtenay? The former was just a dog dependent on the Winter family. The latter was the king of the Brightmoor city business community, at the top of the food chain. How could they compare? When it comes to capital in the entertainment industry, Hui is always the first. Quint Depp's Chenching Entertainment even has to weigh whether it's worthy to carry shoes. On stage, the media asked Eve Wainwright a question, with some deliberate difficulty. "The outside world says that you snatched TV Queen Hayes' role as the female lead. What do you think about this?" Chapter 14, Loss. Eve Wainwright smiled sweetly, with an innocent look. "Of course not. Sister Hayes felt that she was more suitable for the second female lead and wanted to challenge a villain, so she gave the opportunity to me, a newcomer." She was sincere and gave Yarrow Hayes enough face. She looked at Yarrow Hayes through the crowd, a hint of imperceptible provocation in her eyes. "I also want to say thank you to Sister Hayes." The media continued to ask, "You have been signed to Hawaii and are attending the opening banquet with President Courtenay today. Does this mean that the relationship has been made public?" Eve Wainwright shyly raised her eyes to look at the man beside her. He was so tall and handsome that even if he was poisonous, people couldn't refuse him. Hadrian Courtenay's expression was cold and weary, and the corners of his lips slightly curved. "It's obvious." These simple 4 words instantly made everyone understand. Eve Wainwright was Mr. Courtenay's girlfriend, and also the only one who had been made public. It seemed that this opening banquet had completely become Eve Wainwright's one-woman show. Hadrian Courtenay had personally appeared only to support her. All the glory was occupied by Eve Wainwright. She was the most dazzling existence tonight. The necessary procedures were finally completed. After those polite words were finally said, the banquet seemed much more free. Rose just watched Eve Wainwright intimately hold Hadrian Courtenay's arm, smiling brightly among the directors and producers. With a big sponsor like Hadrian Courtenay, her career had just begun, with unlimited future. Inadvertently, Hadrian Courtenay's gaze swept over, and Rose suddenly met his eyes. At this moment, Rose was caught off guard. Fortunately, Hadrian Courtenay just glanced at her lightly and then withdrew his gaze, his expression difficult to discern. Vice Group Leader of the photography group, Jim Chang, reminded Shaw, your little apprentice is in a bit of danger. As an old hand in the industry, Sean naturally understood Jim Chang's meaning. The entertainment industry was not clean anywhere. And he brought Rose, beautiful as a fairy, into the industry. He saw not far away a middle-aged man, in his 40s, with a beer belly, walking towards Rose with a lewd smile. John Wayne sized Rose up and down, very satisfied with this little beauty. He tried his best to make his smile look gentle. You are Shaw's little apprentice, right? Then he introduced himself. I'm the assistant director of this show. My surname is Wayne. You can call me Assistant Director Wayne on weekdays. Rose and Yarrow Ma respectfully said together, Hello, Assistant Director Wayne. John Wayne summoned a waiter and gave each of them a glass of champagne. Come, have a drink. How can you not drink alcohol when you enter the crew? Not drinking is not giving me, the assistant director, face. There are so many people here today, and I also pity the newcomers, so I specially came over to say hello, so that I can take care of you in the future. The culture of drinking and socializing was like fish in water in the entertainment industry. Faced with the status pressure of the assistant director, Rose and Yarrow Ma couldn't refuse, thinking that nothing would happen in public, so they drank a little without hesitation. In the dark, Shaw watched Rose drink the liquor with love drugs, his eyes dim, and he didn't mean to help. Not long after drinking, Rose felt a little dizzy. She thought that the venue was crowded and didn't have good ventilation. The outside stairs were also covered with gold-edged red carpets, extremely luxurious and impressive. Rose's mind became more and more unclear. She gripped the stair railing tightly, and her hot body slowly slid down. The middle-aged man followed closely behind her, waiting for the best opportunity. At this time everyone was gathered in the banquet hall. No one would notice here. Faced with the touch of a strange man, Rose fought back and struggled to get rid of the lewd hands. Her tone was angry, Get away, don't touch me. John Wayne rubbed his hands, thinking that she had no background. Some things had already been agreed upon when Shaw told him that he wanted to bring her into the crew. It was normal for some scandals to happen in the crew. Even if someone saw it, they wouldn't dare to spread it because of his status and power as an assistant director. Little beauty, follow me, and I'll guarantee your riches and honor. The man licked his lips obsessively, his smile disgusting. Why be a small photographer? I can make you a female star. With Rose's face, it was a waste to be a photographer. Rose was still struggling. Get out, get out. She's stubborn, she's feisty, I like it. As the effect of the drug came on, Rose was gradually losing her reason. Just as she was about to fall under. Chapter 15, Repaying a Favor. By chance, Cyril Shaw passed by this place. Unlike Hadrian Courtenay, who wore a dignified suit, he seemed to love wearing loose and comfortable casual clothes, and white pants, clean and elegant. No matter what, Cyril Shaw's narrow eyes always had a faint smile, looking gentle and humble. Cyril Shaw smiled lightly as he walked down the stairs. His straight and slender legs made the white pants very stylish. His voice was clear and cold. It seems that I'm disturbing Assistant Director Wayne. Seeing someone appear, John Wayne was so frightened that he quickly let go of Rose. His beautiful business was suddenly broken, and he stuttered out of guilt, "No. No disturbance, Chief Shaw, aren't you and Director Yi?" Logically speaking, Cyril Shaw was just a screenwriter. Even if he was the main screenwriter, his voice in the crew was usually not high, and his status was ordinary. But in fact, Cyril Shaw's identity was mysterious and unpredictable. Even Mr. Courtenay was courteous to him, and others were even more afraid to provoke him easily. Cyril Shaw casually glanced at the beautiful woman kneeling on the ground. Her originally curled hair was messed up, falling haphazardly on both sides of her cheeks, with a seductive messy beauty. His gaze gradually fell on the woman's fair and beautiful face. Her facial features were familiar. Then he squatted down and brushed away the drooping bangs. She looked uncomfortable, her face flushed, and she was very moving. Cyril Shaw noticed that she had been drugged, and it was probably not light. His blue-green eyes flashed slightly, and even with beauty in front of him, he had no desire. If he hadn't appeared in time, she would have been taken into the wolf's den by John Wayne, and what awaited her would never be just one man. John Wayne wanted to come forward, but he didn't dare. It seemed that even Cyril Shaw had taken a fancy to this little beauty. Everyone knew that Chief Shaw didn't like women. Mr. Courtenay had specially set up a meeting for him at Nightshade to welcome him, but he had politely refused and didn't give him face. John Wayne tentatively asked, "If Chief Shaw likes her, I'll give her to you?" Cyril Shaw's well-jointed palms gently and gentlemanly helped Rose up. His tone was indifferent, and the meaning of his words was clear, "She's my friend." Friend? Can there be pure friendship between men and women? John Wayne didn't believe it. But Cyril Shaw had already said so, and he didn't dare to offend this mysterious person, so he apologized and looked for an excuse to slip away. "I was blind. I didn't know this woman was your friend. I'll get out of here right away." After saying that, John Wayne slipped away faster than anyone else. Rose's eyes reflected the face of an unfamiliar man. What little scent she had left reminded her of who the man was, and her voice was a little soft. "Mr. Shaw?" Cyril Shaw smiled lightly. "You don't need to call me Mr. Shaw. I'm only 5 years older than you." The effects of the drug on Rose had already begun to take effect, and she definitely couldn't go back to the banquet. "In this state, I'll take you back to your room first," Cyril Shaw said thoughtfully. "Thank you," Rose said weakly, full of gratitude. Although she had only met Cyril Shaw twice, she felt that he wasn't the kind of man who would take advantage of others. Rose was wearing a white crop top. Her beautiful waistline was exposed, looking like it could be grasped with a handful. Cyril Shaw gentlemanly turned his face away, not taking advantage of her. The only physical contact was holding her wrist. He really wasn't moved by beauty and saved her, as if it was only to repay a favor. The two walked towards the hotel room. Hadrian Courtenay had just seen Rose's figure at the banquet, and his heart was instantly filled with stormy waves. Why did she appear on the Eternal Longing crew? Did she know that the male lead of this show was Xander Westland, so she wanted to take advantage of her work and have an illicit affair with him? After greeting everyone in the hall, he immediately came to find Rose. But he saw. Chapter 16, Body and Mind. Cyril Shaw didn't know Hadrian Courtenay at all before. He only knew about his existence later when he investigated something. When he first saw Hadrian Courtenay's appearance, the face that resembled an old friend surprised him. In that instant, he understood some things. Now he was kindly taking Rose back to her room, but unfortunately, he ran into Hadrian Courtenay. But it seemed that he was misunderstood. Cyril Shaw smiled lightly and greeted him, "Mr. Courtenay, why are you here?" Two men who were about 6'2" stood facing each other, and the ground reflected dark shadows. They were equally handsome and unparalleled, and neither was better than the other. Hadrian Courtenay's jaw was tight, and his dark eyes were as dark as ink, falling on Rose like a fierce blizzard, as if to swallow her. His hands, placed in the shadows, clenched into fists, and his voice was low, containing anger, looking for someone. Because he had equal status, Cyril Shaw didn't have the respect and fear that others had when facing Hadrian Courtenay. He looked directly at him. "I don't know who Mr. Courtenay is looking for." "My person." After saying that, Hadrian Courtenay forcibly dragged Rose over from Cyril Shaw's hand. Rose's eyes were blurred and slightly surprised. "Hadrian Courtenay?" When Hadrian Courtenay passed by Cyril Shaw, he said coldly, "She's mine." Cyril Shaw's dense and curled eyelashes fell, and the bright white lights were slightly refracted, making his profile even more clear and cold. He lightly helped his glasses and said, "Mr. Courtenay shouldn't be too confident." Hadrian Courtenay snorted lightly, not saying a word. Cyril Shaw watched the figures of the two gradually leave. The gentle look had long since disappeared, replaced by a bit of cold ridicule. "The body is yours, but the heart is not necessarily." In the hallway, Rose was held in Hadrian Courtenay's arms. The effects of the drug were coming on, and she moved restlessly. Her fair face was covered in sweat, and her red lips were slightly open. "It's hot, so hot." Hadrian Courtenay's eyebrows lowered, showing a dark and sinister look. He tightened his grip on Rose's waist, his veins bulging, hurting Rose and making her frown. If he hadn't happened to run into them, where would Cyril Shaw have taken her? Cyril Shaw had only been in Brightmoor City for a few days, but Rose had already hooked up with him? As soon as he entered the room, Hadrian Courtenay forcefully pinched Rose's neck, the back of his hand showing alarming veins, and pressed her against the black and white decorated wall without pity. At this moment, his face was extremely gloomy, like a king. His phoenix eyes narrowed, biting his back teeth fiercely, and asked sharply, "Rose, you said you liked me. Is that why you're giving me a green hat again and again? One Xander Westland is not enough, and you want to seduce the young master of the Shaw family of Imperial City?" The Imperial City Five Great Families were even more noble than the Brightmoor City Five Great Families. The most noble of them was the Winter family, the top wealthy family in the country, which countless women dreamed of. The drug was surging in her body, and Rose was frightened into a bit of sanity by Hadrian Courtenay's scolding. Out of instinct, she wanted to pry open the man's hand that was tightly pinching her neck, and she said tremblingly, "No. Not." Hadrian Courtenay snorted coldly and then threw her on the bed, took off his suit jacket, and violently untied his tie and cuffs. He looked down at her indifferently, his upturned phoenix eyes had a natural coldness, without any emotion. Rose's crescent eyes were blurred, as if containing a thin layer of water mist, her dark eyes were moist, her appearance was delicate and soft, like a newly transformed little fox, innocent and ignorant. The deep shadow cast by the man shrouded her completely. Hadrian Courtenay's eyes flickered, and he took out his phone from the side and turned on the shooting mode. This night was long and sleepless, with endless torment. Chapter 17, Accepting Defeat. Rose slept for a very long time. So long that the memories in her mind were like a nightmare, making it hard for her to believe. She actually took the initiative with Hadrian Courtenay. Knowing that she had been drugged, he took advantage of her, coerced and seduced her. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, Rose looked at the hickeys on her neck, many and deep, with red marks. They wouldn't disappear in a week. Last night was the most intense one in 3 months. Today was the first day of filming for the crew, but she had slept directly until 5 p.m. Hadrian Courtenay hadn't let her go all night and all morning. "You don't want to be slept by me and want to let Cyril Shaw sleep with you? So you are rushing to send him?" Hadrian Courtenay's cold voice sounded so vividly in her ears, extremely humiliating. Rose had been by Hadrian Courtenay's side for so long, but she was not as good as Eve Wainwright, who had just met him. At least Hadrian Courtenay made her shine and gave her a smooth career. Rose's legs trembled. She rubbed her waist, leaned on the wall of the hallway, and walked back to her room with difficulty. In the room, Yarrow Ma was anxiously waiting for her to return. As soon as she saw Rose, Yarrow Ma came up to her and asked with concern, "Where did you go?" "I heard that last night." Yarrow Ma stopped talking. "Last night someone saw you with Mr. Shaw, you too." Yarrow Ma looked Rose up and down, and immediately saw the clear hickeys on Rose's neck. As an adult, she instantly understood. Yeroma shockingly raised her hand to cover her lips, in disbelief. No way, did you two do that so quickly? Rose wanted to explain, but she didn't know how to explain it well. In this state, it was obvious what had happened. If she said that she had slept with Hadrian Courtenay all night, it was unlikely anyone would believe her, and they would even scold her for dreaming. Seeing that Rose didn't clarify, Yeroma felt that her guess was confirmed and asked happily and curiously, "Mr. Shaw looks like such a gentleman. What's he like in bed?" Yeroma shook Rose's arm. "Tell me quickly. I'm a little curious about what that abstinent man is like." "It's over. It's a big misunderstanding." Rose casually said, "I want to rest for a while." "You really need to rest. It's been a day and a night. I didn't expect Mr. Shaw to be so good." Yeroma misunderstood even more. Yeroma smiled. "You can rest first. I'll go buy you some food." "Thank you." After Yeroma left, Rose suddenly thought of something. She took out her phone from her pocket and called Sean Shaw. After it was connected, Sean spoke first, with full of worry and concern. "Rose, where did you go? I couldn't get through when I called you. I didn't see your shadow all day. Did something happen?" Rose hesitated a little, and her voice was a little dull. "Mr. Shaw, I was drugged by that assistant director Wayne last night." She originally thought that nothing would happen in public, but she didn't expect the inside of the entertainment industry to be so dirty, giving people drugs in public. Sean was silent for a while. "Did he?" "No." Fortunately, Cyril Shaw arrived in time and saved her. Although she was finally taken away by Hadrian Courtenay and misunderstood something, he at least helped her detoxify. Rose's eyes darkened, and her tone was serious. "Mr. Shaw, can we make that assistant director Wayne get the punishment he deserves? Let him leave the crew? Bad people can't escape justice and can't go on to harm others." Sean understood what Rose meant, but he was a little embarrassed. "Rose, it's not easy to do. The crew has complicated internal relationships. John Wayne has a relative relationship with the general director Yier, and Yier is a gold director under White and is Mr. Courtenay's man. We can't deal with them." Hearing this, Rose's eyes couldn't hide her disappointment. Faced with the absolute crushing of wealth and power, ordinary people were just insignificant ants. As for Hadrian Courtenay, he wouldn't help her and would even ridicule her for being unrestrained. "I was too busy last night, so I couldn't take care of you." Sean's words were dyed with self-blame and guilt. He sighed softly. "I'll help you ask for another day off. Come to the set when you're rested." "Okay." Rose had just finished talking to Sean when the doorbell rang. Chapter 18, Boyfriend. She slowly got up to open the door, and she saw Cyril Shaw standing outside the door, holding something in his hand, with his cat at his feet, sitting there exceptionally well behaved. The man always had a smiling face, gentle and friendly. Although his eyes always squinted when he smiled, he was good-looking, and he had the feeling of a big brother next door. "Mr. Shaw?" Rose was shocked by his sudden appearance. "I told you that you don't need to call me Mr. Shaw. Just call me Cyril, or Brother Cyril." The man's voice was always so gentle. He took the initiative to explain his purpose. "I didn't see you all day when I was filming, so I couldn't help but come to see you." Rose lowered her eyes and said softly, "Thank you for last night." Cyril Shaw's mouth curled up in a stronger smile. "You're welcome. I'm also repaying a favor. I haven't had a chance to thank you for helping me find Snowball yet. Can I ask what your name is?" Cyril Shaw's gentle temperament really made Rose unable to refuse. She replied, "Rose Chandler." "It's a very nice name." Cyril Shaw praised without being stingy. Cyril Shaw handed the shopping bag in his hand to Rose. "There are some desserts inside. I think girls like to eat them." Rose simply looked at it. The deep red bean cakes inside were her favorite. For a moment, she was in a trance. Memories of the past flooded into her mind. "You and Mr. Courtenay? Last night, Hadrian Courtenay took her away in front of Cyril Shaw. Rose knew that she couldn't hide it from him, so she explained, "I know Mr. Courtenay. We have that kind of relationship." She raised her eyes to look at Cyril Shaw, and asked, "Can you help me keep it a secret?" "I know. I won't say it," Cyril Shaw said quickly. Rose didn't expect Cyril Shaw to agree so quickly, and she was a little shocked. What if everyone misunderstands that it's you? Will it affect your reputation? It doesn't matter. This kind of thing is not a big loss for men. It's you girls who have to protect yourself. Cyril Shaw's voice was extremely gentle. This feeling of being like a teacher, a friend, and a brother made Rose greedy. Being with him was very comfortable. When Yarrow Ma bought food and came back, she happened to run into Cyril Shaw leaving the room, with his cat following at his feet. Her gossipy heart instantly burned. She took the initiative to greet Cyril Shaw. "Mr. Shaw is here to see Rose?" She had already firmly believed that the two had slept together last night, and maybe they had become a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. Cyril Shaw still smiled. "Yes, I'm giving her some desserts. Mr. Shaw is so gentle, so considerate. Rose is so lucky to have a boyfriend like you." Cyril Shaw responded with a smile, not admitting it, and not clarifying it. After staying in the room for a day and 2 nights, the hickeys on Rose's neck still hadn't disappeared. Helpless, she had to wear a high-necked shirt in the hot summer to cover up these ambiguities. There were many people on the set, and it was very lively. The crew was divided into 2 groups to shoot at the same time. A group was shooting the scenes between the female lead and the female 2 today, and B group was shooting the court scenes of the male lead and the male 2. Yarrow Ma was a makeup artist, and she had been doing makeup for the male 2, so she could see Xander Westland more often. Rose had been following Sean Shaw, carefully learning about the shooting. With Cyril Shaw's relationship, Vice Director John Wayne didn't even dare to come forward when he saw her. During breaks, Hadrian Courtenay came to visit his little love. Eve Wainwright was sitting on the man's lap, and the two were very close, talking and laughing. It was actually quite uncomfortable to film period dramas in the summer because it was very hot, but the sugar daddy had the ability to use money, so wherever Eve Wainwright went, there would be special cooling fans and expensive cold drinks. He spoiled her to the fullest. Rose was sitting on the ancient corridor, seriously learning the camera knowledge that Sean was teaching her. The curved eaves could barely block some of the hot sun. The light poured down wantonly in the air, forming a beautiful golden light on her body, making her look quiet and beautiful. Her major was photography. She was not very proficient in film and television videography, but because of Hadrian Courtenay's power, there was no place for her in the Brightmoor City photography circle. Photography and videography had common points and also different points. The biggest difference was that the former was static and the latter was dynamic, but the basic theory was similar. Not far away, Yarrow Hayes was very upset to see Eve Wainwright being so favored, but she was also helpless. Eve Wainwright was just relying on Hadrian Courtenay to support her. If she didn't have this favor. The assistant was fanning Yarrow Hayes frantically, afraid that this big star would lose her temper. Because of the hot weather and the costume, Yarrow Hayes was very annoyed. "Didn't you eat? Is that all the strength you have?" Then she shouted to the corridor across the street, "Hey, the woman on the corridor, go buy me an iced coffee." Chapter 19, Classmate. Suddenly called out to, Rose was surprised. She looked towards the source of the voice, but because the sunlight was too strong, she couldn't see the person's face very clearly. Rose pointed to herself uncertainly. Seeing this, Yarrow Hayes raised her voice, sounding a little shrewish, "Yes, it's you. You're just idle, why aren't you going quickly?" Rose was a little unwilling. She was a staff member, not her assistant. Rose got up and walked over, wanting to explain to her. As the woman walked closer, Yarrow Hayes looked at the increasingly familiar face, a strange light flashing in her eyes, surprised but with contempt. "Rose Chandler?" Hearing this, Rose's eyebrows furrowed slightly, puzzled as to why the person in front of her knew her name so accurately. She was sure that there was no woman in her memory named Yarrow Hayes. Seeing an old acquaintance, Yarrow Hayes didn't care about the heat anymore. She looked Rose up and down, dressed so drab and conservative. Wearing a high collar in the summer? Seeing that Rose didn't recognize her, Yarrow Hayes was triumphant and proud. It's only been a few years, and you've already forgotten me? I'm Heidi Hayes. We were good classmates for 3 years in high school. As soon as she mentioned the name Heidi Hayes, Rose instantly knew who she was. It was just that face full of high technology. Yarrow Hayes must have had plastic surgery. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to recognize her. After not seeing each other for 4 years, as her status increased, Yarrow Hayes looked down on Rose even more. Yarrow Hayes pinched Rose's long sleeves with 2 fingers, looking disgusted. Mixing so badly? Where's the old man who kept you before? Didn't want you anymore? Yarrow Hayes had always been so unpleasant to talk to. Rose had been mocked by her a lot when she was in high school. That was why Rose didn't bother going back to the high school reunions every year. Rose pulled her sleeves out of her fingers, obviously not wanting to reminisce with her. But Yarrow Hayes didn't want to let her go. She had finally gotten the chance to see her again, and she hadn't shown off properly yet. I told you before that old men weren't reliable. Look at you now, you don't have anything. I heard that you didn't do well on the exam either. Was it because he didn't want you during that time, so you didn't have the heart to review? If you're poor, you can only rely on the college entrance examination. If you don't even have the college entrance examination. Before Yarrow Hayes could finish her words, Rose interrupted her coldly. I scored 702 on the college entrance examination. I just didn't get into Imperial University. But she still went to Brightmoor University, which was ranked among the top 3 in the country. Yarrow Hayes' face was a little stiff. She looked at Rose, who was getting more and more beautiful, and felt jealous. In high school, Rose was a well-known school beauty, and now in this crew full of men, it was guaranteed that someone would soon like her. The fastest way for a woman to move up was to have a beautiful face. And Rose had such a natural, stunning face. Seeing Cyril Shaw walking this way, and connecting it with the rumors these past few days, Yarrow Hayes deliberately said very loudly, you have to keep your eyes open carefully in the future, and don't look for old men again. After following them for so long, it's all for nothing in the end. All the best youth is lost. Listening to Yarrow Hayes' sarcasm, Rose was a little annoyed. Her indifference was what made them intensify their insults. 3 men make a tiger. Being pure and self-clear seemed to become a joke in the eyes of those with intentions. Rose didn't want to pay attention to her anymore and turned to leave. But as soon as she turned around, she ran into Hadrian Courtenay. Chapter 20, The Balance of 3. Hadrian Courtenay looked down at her, his face not too good. His phoenix eyes narrowed, and his tone carried a bit of ridicule, gnashing his teeth. Old man? Rose froze in place, not knowing how to explain. He knew that she had other men before. Xander Westland heard from his assistant that Rose was also on the crew, so he ran to find her during his rest time. Cyril Shaw had also just bought some cold drinks from outside and came back. The 3 men heard the news that Rose had been kept by an old man at the same time, with different expressions. Hadrian Courtenay's hand in his pants pocket clenched into a fist, his face cold. Xander's eyes showed heartache and pity, with a slight loss. Cyril Shaw smiled faintly, not surprised at all, as if he had known the truth for a long time. He ordered his assistant, everyone has worked hard to film, distribute these cold drinks. Yarrow Ma followed Xander Westland and, as soon as she stepped here, felt the unusually solidified atmosphere. It was obviously a hot summer, but she felt a bit cold. She saw Mr. Courtenay, Film Emperor Xander, and Mr. Shaw, each standing in different directions, like a balance of 3. This picture was a visual feast, so beautiful to the extreme, but also very strange. There was a hint of an arena? Yarrow Ma slowly moved to Rose's side, tugged at her sleeve, and asked in a low voice, what's going on? Rose bit her lip slightly, raised her eyes to look at Hadrian Courtenay. The man's dark lashes fell, casting a shadow on his eyelids, his expression difficult to discern. At this time, Cyril Shaw walked over with the lemon ice he had just bought and handed it to Rose gently, his voice clear. Girls like to eat sour and sweet things. The afternoon sun was a bit intense, shining through the gaps in the leaves on Cyril Shaw's face, making that smile even more gentle. Faced with Cyril Shaw's kindness, Rose couldn't refuse. She took the thing and said politely, "Thank you." Yarrow Ma, as an outsider, didn't know the relationships at all and joked, "Mr. Shaw is really a 100% qualified boyfriend, so considerate and careful." "I'm so envious of Rose." Being misunderstood, Cyril Shaw didn't explain, smiling and saying, "Everyone has a share." The slow-witted Yarrow Ma didn't notice the gloomy faces of Hadrian Courtenay and Xander Westland and continued to joke, "Then it seems that we are benefiting from Rose. Mr. Shaw bought so many cold drinks just to have a chance to please Rose." Rose coughed lightly, reminding the big-mouthed Yarrow Ma, "Yarrow, we're not boyfriend and girlfriend." Cyril Shaw's eyes curved even more, his smile even deeper. "Indeed, not yet. Not now, soon will be." Yarrow Ma was a little taller than Rose. She raised her hand to hug her shoulders, and the questions she asked were getting more and more dangerous, with a minute-to-funeral situation. "Don't you like Mr. Shaw?" Rose subconsciously looked at Hadrian Courtenay. She saw that he had already lost interest in this side and was murmuring with Eve Wainwright in a cool place, "So loving." "Yarrow, don't talk nonsense." "Where am I talking nonsense? You two were clearly—" Rose quickly covered Yarrow Ma's mouth, afraid that she would say something shocking. Eve Wainwright could feel that although the man was intimate with her, his mind was all on another woman. She looked at Rose, a hint of displeasure in her eyes. On the other side, Xander Westland thought about the relationship between Rose and Cyril Shaw. He had known Rose for so long and was quite clear about her circle of friends. Rose always liked to walk alone during college and had almost no friends. And Cyril Shaw wasn't from Brightmoor City. This was his first time here, so how could he have a relationship with Rose? Yarrow Ma glanced at Xander Westland out of the corner of her eye. Seeing that her idol had already gone away, she quickly followed. "I won't say it. I'm going back to Group B." Seeing the screenwriter Cyril Shaw's unusual attitude towards Rose, Yarrow Hayes was secretly upset. Sure enough, she was a little fox spirit who knew how to seduce men. She had already said that Rose had been kept by an old man, but she didn't care at all? Chapter 21, Giving Up. In the quiet and cool pavilion. "I'm sorry. Yarrow, she's just so straightforward." "I'll explain the relationship between us to her first," Rose said. "It's okay. She's very cute." Cyril Shaw always spoke with a faint smile, gentle and friendly. Rose's eyebrows were puzzled. She didn't understand why Cyril Shaw would help her so much and care about her so much. Everyone was an adult. It was inevitable to think in that way. After hesitating for a moment, Rose boldly asked, "Mr. Shaw, are you?" Cyril Shaw laughed cheerfully, the arc of his mouth very large, and his unique eyes were also stained with a smile, hot and straightforward. "Then would you be willing to give me a chance to try?" Hearing this, Rose was shocked, her lips slightly open. Cyril Shaw really liked her? "I want to find a mother for Snowball. It likes you very much, and so do I." This sudden confession made Rose at a loss, flustered, and it was hard to believe that Cyril Shaw had fallen in love with her after knowing her for only a few days. At this moment, Rose couldn't find a suitable mood to face Cyril Shaw, blushing, and saying, "It's going to start filming. I'm going to go to work first." Looking at the woman's hurried figure, Cyril Shaw felt a trace of helplessness. "It seems a little hasty." When she finished work in the evening, Rose received 2 messages. One was from Xander Westland, inviting her to dinner. The other was from Hadrian Courtenay's assistant, Ferris Fong. The content was that Hadrian Courtenay wanted to see her, asking her to go to the top floor of the hotel immediately. In the presidential suite on the top floor. Rose pushed the door open and entered. She saw Hadrian Courtenay sitting on a black leather sofa at a glance. He was wearing a suit, his temperament dangerous and threatening. His left leg was on his right leg, and his bare white ankle seemed noble. The man was smoking, and the strong smell of smoke floated in the room. Clusters of white smoke curled upward, and the masculine aura was strong. Hadrian Courtenay's first sentence was a contemptuous humiliation, very unpleasant. "Are you so cheap? Do you accept even old men?" He really wanted to settle the score for this afternoon. "Boyfriend?" Hadrian Courtenay snorted disdainfully, his eyes dark, the hand holding the cigarette had bulging veins, and the strong sense of strength was a bit terrifying. "Two-timing, who gave you the courage?" "We're just friends," Rose clarified. Of course, Hadrian Courtenay didn't believe these words. What kind of friends could walk into a hotel room at night? More like a FWB. Hadrian Courtenay had lived for 28 years and had always been arrogant and self-centered. Being able to want Rose, this used. Good, was all because her face looked a bit like Sheridan, but if she dared to eat from the bowl and look at what's in the pot. After receiving Hadrian Courtenay's message, Eve Wainwright immediately dressed up carefully again, putting on her most beautiful makeup, wearing a special, flirtatious red tassel dress, twisting her waist to come to the room. Unlike what she had imagined, there was another woman in the room. She recognized her. She had seen her at Nightshade. "Mr. Courtenay, you have a woman in your room. Why did you call me here?" Eve Wainwright pretended to be angry, her voice soft and clingy, and it was hard for men not to love her. Hadrian Courtenay glanced at Rose, who was standing upright. When facing Eve Wainwright, he had a few strands of gentleness in his expression. "She's here to serve you." Rose froze in place. Before she could recover, she saw Hadrian Courtenay easily picking up Eve Wainwright and going straight to the bedroom inside. What he wanted to do was obvious. Rose turned around and wanted to leave without thinking, but Hadrian Courtenay's cold voice came, "Come over here. I want you to stand by the bed and watch with your own eyes." "Watch what?" "Watch him do that thing with other women." Rose took a few steps towards the door. Behind her, the man's words carried an angry tone, "If you dare to go, the video from that night." What would happen? He would definitely send it out, making her a laughingstock, a licentious woman who didn't know how to check herself. Rose clenched her hands, angry, and couldn't help but curse, "Despicable." Although she was drugged that night and her mind was blurred, she could still vaguely remember Hadrian Courtenay taking a video. They had been together for 3 months, and she had never actively pleaded with him, but she was seduced and entrapped that night. In the end, Rose succumbed to Hadrian Courtenay's power and reluctantly stood by the bed, watching the man and woman having fun. "Rose, do you really think Cyril Shaw would want a used good that I played with?" This night, the two had sex until their love faded. Unfortunately, Rose didn't eat dinner, and the busy work during the day made her hungry, almost fainting. Rose stayed until the middle of the night before she was freed. She could vaguely remember that, halfway through, Hadrian Courtenay had ordered her to change the soiled sheets. The figures of the men and women went from the bed to the window, and then to the bathroom, wishing to show her until the end of the world. Maybe she had to understand that Eve Wainwright could really replace her. Maybe she should consider giving up this cold-hearted Hadrian Courtenay. Chapter 22, Finale. Hadrian Courtenay found Yarrow Hayes to ask about Rose being kept by an old man before, but he didn't find out anything useful. Rose was packing up her equipment to go to lunch and met Eve Wainwright. Eve Wainwright's eyes were not friendly and even jealous. She grabbed Rose's wrist, with great force. Rose was anxious to get rid of her restraint, but Eve Wainwright was very strong, so she was anxious for a while. In the end, the two of them fell into the pool. 2 splashes of water resounded around. Hadrian Courtenay and Cyril Shaw, who were walking this way, jumped into the water at the same time, swimming in different directions. When Rose's eyes were blurred, she saw Hadrian Courtenay swimming towards her. She stretched out her hand in joy and anticipation, but found that he wasn't coming to save her. Hadrian Courtenay swam past her coldly, heading towards another woman. Cyril Shaw then swam to Rose's side, pulling her into his arms. The broad and solid man's body gave her infinite security. The two men each hugged the women to the shore. Rose explained, but Hadrian Courtenay still thought that she had pushed Eve Wainwright into the pool, and she was heartbroken. That night, she seriously and earnestly got along with Hadrian Courtenay for the first time. Rose made up her mind, Hadrian Courtenay, I don't like you anymore. Even if you look 7 parts like him. Let's break up. Hadrian Courtenay was stunned, not expecting Rose to say this, and her tone was so resolute. He couldn't help but frown and fiercely pinched Rose's cheeks, hooked up with Cyril Shaw, got his support, and now you dare to be tough? Yes. Hearing this, Hadrian Courtenay threw Rose away and said firmly, gritting his teeth, okay, don't ever roll back in this life. So, after that night, Rose never saw Hadrian Courtenay again. Eve Wainwright became his favorite. Her work became busier day by day. Until the day she finished filming, she left here with Cyril Shaw. When she heard the news about Hadrian Courtenay again, it was said that he was getting married. His white moonlight had returned. Rose wasn't too sad. Because they had no relationship anymore. As he wished, she would never roll back in this life. Cyril Shaw was really good to her, so good that one day, she found that the one she loved the most was by her side. He knew all her preferences, knew she loved to eat red bean cakes and lemon-flavored things. Because she liked cats, he also raised cats. His temperament was really similar to someone in her memory, very similar. Making Rose had to doubt that he was him. The person she had been thinking about had returned. One day, Cyril Shaw gently hugged her, stroking her head carefully, and said to her, I'm sorry, I came back late. He told her that he had lost a period of memory and had stayed alone in a sanatorium abroad for a long, long time. So long that he couldn't remember how long it had been. Rose turned and hugged him back, it doesn't matter, as long as it's you, I'll wait no matter how long it takes. Let's get married. Okay. My biggest dream in life is to marry you. You used to shelter me from the wind and rain, and now, I wash my hands and make soup for you. Every night, there will be a light on for you in the house. After getting married, Rose and Cyril Shaw left Brightmoor City and would never come back. All the people and things would just disperse like this. Rose didn't want to pay attention to the people and things in Brightmoor City anymore. They were no longer important. With Cyril Shaw's help, her career was getting better and better. She even won the championship in a photography competition. He won over everyone as soon as he appeared. Fortunately, after countless days and nights, she finally waited for the one she loved the most. From youth to old age, the one I love is only you. Never to be separated again in this life.